Hello there, Mr. Lee here, the man, the myth, the legend, specifically telling you about how to tackle the myth and religion paper for your GCSE in Classical Civilisation. So what exactly does the paper look like? Well, as you know, in GCSE Classical Civilisation, we study the civilization of Greece and the civilization of Rome. That's two civilizations there. So in this paper, there are three sections because it makes sense like that. What are those sections called? They're called Greece, they're called Rome, and then there's a bit called Greece and Rome. So the whole row paper is worth 90 marks. Each of those papers is worth a third of that, 30 marks each. We're going to have a look and see what the composition of the papers look like. You're going to get two 8 markers, one each on the Greece and the Rome section. And then on the Greece and Rome section, that's where you've got a longer essay to write, a 15-mark questions. So what's the section A, what does section B looks like? Well, they're identical section. And what that means is you get exactly the same format. So you get 22 marks which are shorter questions based on some sources that have been provided, and you need to be able to identify certain features and to explain them. Beyond that, you've got the 8-mark questions. What are the success criteria here, you ask? Well, for each 8-mark question, you'll provide at least one, if not two, sources. And in your answer, you should be able to refer to the sources as well as your own knowledge, okay? You should aim to make about 4 points, at least 4 points, and within that, perhaps make 2 of those about the sources provided at least, and make 2 of them about something from your own knowledge if you can. Although sometimes things are not so clear-cut, so if you can identify certain features from an image of something using your own knowledge, you already have satisfied the own knowledge element of that question. As you make that point, make sure you provide something specific from those sources or from your own knowledge, and then explain or link it to a question, explain how it's relevant to that question. Is kind of how I've put it. You don't need to overdo the points. As long as you've got some evidence and you've explained the relevance, you'll be fine. Okay, try and make it a paragraph per point. So if you're going to make 4 points, then there should be 4 paragraphs. Sometimes the life of an examiner is difficult when they're marking your papers. If you make it easy to see, they will be happier, and because they're making judgments about your paper, it's generally good to make their lives better. All right, section A and B, that was that, and now we're on to section C, which is a little bit more complicated. Well, it's not a little bit more complicated, it's just got that 15-mark question, and people look at it and go, it's not that really much of an issue. So 15 marks of that section C is going to be looking at 2 of the sources provided, probably one on Greece and one on Rome, but on the same sort of idea and theme. And you're going to be asked to explain how those sources tell you something about Hercules, or how those sources tell you about the worship of Mars/Ares, so the Greek and Roman name of the same god, okay? What I suggest you do is you summarize basically what that source is about, and then make 2 sorts of explanation. The questions on this section are generally going to be out of a multiple of 3, all right? 3 marks or 6 marks. If you summarize what the source basically is, and then you explain what it is, then you get those marks, all right? Obviously, look at the question, look at how you should summarize that particular source, so it tailors to that. So if it says, explain how source F and G shows that Hercules is important to the Romans and the Greeks, then as you summarize your source, you can already start directing your answer towards it. 15-mark question. So we've had 15 marks worth of shorter questions, then you've got the 15-mark essay. There's only one essay in this paper. Make it a good one. Make sure you have an introduction and conclusion, but before all that, plan. Okay, once you've planned it, you should know which way your argument's going to go. Okay, as you look and decide which of the 2 essays you want to answer, just annotate the question, perhaps highlight the key themes within the question so that you know how you need to direct your answer to address the question. If the questions are about comparing 2 festivals, make sure you do refer to that, okay? Choose a question where you can really show off your own knowledge, because no sources are provided for a 15-mark question. Okay, so you're going to decide your question, you're going to plan it, You're going to know your argument and make sure your argument is in your introduction, your conclusion. You signpost it at the start, you signpost it at the end, and then you write about 3 to 4 paragraphs about that discussion. Make sure most of these questions are going to ask you to what extent, how far, that sort of thing. Make sure you do within your paragraph, just make those little comparisons, just show that you are actually thinking them, ranking about them, okay? You should refer to a range of information, and you should always make judgments about the question. When I say ranking, that's what I mean by make judgments. When I say always refer to specific information, what do I mean? Well, if the question is about festivals and you've learned about what things happen on each day, try and go into those granular detail. The thing about those 15-mark questions is sometimes people think that if you've put in an argument, then you'll be fine, but actually they don't think about all the nitty-gritty details that they might need. Certainly in my lessons, you know, we've learnt a lot of those nitty-gritty things. What things happens on each day of the festival, and also perhaps if you think of something else, like the details on each part of the story, on the myth of Cacus and Hercules, for example, you can get into quite a lot of detail. You need to be ready to show them. Of course, they have to be relevant, but don't hold back in showing off how well you know the course. You have to do that unprompted, okay? And you have got plenty of time to do it. If you look behind me now, there's a suggestion of how you might split up how you tackle the 3 sections of the paper. So logically, if it's a 90-minute paper, you split into thirds, then I suppose 30, 30, 30 would make sense. But I would say by 30 minutes in, you should definitely have moved on to the next section, because you want to give yourself some time for that final section there. If you have 25% extra time, then I wouldn't worry. I think sometimes it's good to use a rounded number. So if you have extra time, and this applies to you, I would say move on after 35 minutes to section B, and move on after another 35 minutes. So move on after 70 minutes to section C. Don't worry about how long exactly that is. Just make sure you get to section C at that point. So to put it in another way, make sure you move on from section A in normal time. So for normal time, make sure you move on from section A in 30 minutes. Make sure you move on from section B to section C in 60 minutes in. If you're an extra timer with 25% extra time, then move on from section A to section B 35 minutes in, and move on from section B to section C 70 minutes in. And that should give you enough time to tackle this. And you are writing a paper on creating your own myth and your own legend. All right, go for it. Do well. Good luck.